It's not that individualism is best or collectivism is best. This is a false dichotomy. The reality is that these need to be dynamically balanced all the time within society. We need to, at the same time, allow people to have individual rights and freedoms and autonomy, but also realize that these individuals are not really individuals, but they're part of a larger collective, and that there are certain benefits that we get from being a collective. In fact, mankind's greatest strength as a species, we're the most powerful species on this planet because we're able to form cohesive, ordered collectives on a massive scale like no other species is able to do. You can have a small herd of antelope, you can have a school of fish, but what? It's like a couple hundred, a couple thousand fish in a school at most. Maybe you have a flock of birds that has a couple thousand birds in it, but there's no serious organization there, so they're not able to do anything really interesting. So really, these animals are just restricted to very basic things like shelter, food, and a couple of other basic things. They're not able to do anything interesting, and therefore they are very limited. You might say a bird is very free. Yes, a bird is free in the sense that it doesn't have a government controlling it. But notice also how limited the bird is. It's not free in the sense that all it does is shits and eats and has sex, and that's all it can do. And it can't cure its own diseases. It can't build nice shelters for itself. It can't educate itself. They're so limited. See? So we as a species, because we're more intelligent, we're more capable, we need that collectivism. We need to form a community. Not only are we forming a community because it serves us individually, but also it's something that feels good. Being part of a community gives you a sense of larger purpose, which a lot of people at stage orange overlook the importance of. Community. Community is not an evil. Now, there are problems with taking collectivism too far. Certainly there are problems. It needs to be delicately balanced. But there's an even deeper point here, which many people don't understand at all, which is that society is a whole-on and human beings are whole-ons. What is this? A whole-on. A whole-on is a whole topic that I'll have an episode on in the future. But a whole-on means that it's a part and a whole simultaneously. So for example, my hand is a whole-on. What that means is that it's a whole in that it can do whatever a hand does, and we can call it a hand, and we can understand that it's a whole. You know, a hand is like an individual unit. But also it's made up of little cells and molecules and muscles and bones and tendons, and each of those are parts of the whole. So in this way, the hand is made up of smaller things. But also the hand itself is a smaller part of my entire body. And the hand itself doesn't have any power or ability unless it's part of my heart and my brain. It's all interconnected, my whole nervous system and all this. You know, the hand needs the teeth because without the teeth, I can't eat food and I can't generate the calories that are necessary to power this hand. So you see how it's deeply interconnected this way. Likewise, the hand can't be a hand unless it has all the parts that it needs. It needs the bones, it needs the veins, it needs the blood, it needs the molecules that are making up this hand. So here is the problem that people fall into. They don't recognize that human beings are also whole-ons. We are not the highest unit. There is a society above us. So the way that nature works is that there are whole-ons within whole-ons within whole-ons within whole-ons, all the way up and all the way down. But we humans tend to be so arrogant that we think that all of this is just for us and that this is just all for my personal individual ego. And then we forget that we're part of this larger collective. We're part of a communion. We're part of society, which is its own whole-on. And so the trick with these whole-ons is that there's always a delicate balance that needs to be struck between the autonomy of an individual part versus the communion that that part takes part in of some larger whole-on. So for example, for my hand to function, my hand cannot have a will of its own. It needs to be subject to the communion of the larger unit that it's a part of. Because if my hand had its own desires and ideas, it would start doing whatever it wants, right? This would be a problem because the hand then is not serving me, the higher unit that it's designed to serve. So the hand needs to know its place within the whole scheme. Otherwise, it becomes pathological and dysfunctional. So this is what happens with a lot of libertarians and stage orange people, is that they are like the hand which forgets that it's part of something larger. And so they act like individuals, swing their pendulum all the way to this end towards 100% freedom and autonomy without recognizing that it's not just about autonomy, it's about communion as well. You don't just want 100% individualism and autonomy, you want some measure of communion, but also you don't want too much communion to the point where you just become like the Borg collective and your own individuality is completely wiped out. So what you have to understand is that when we're talking about government and society, there's more going on than just a bunch of individuals. At each level of reality, when you get a bunch of little parts together, combine them together, it's more than the sum of its parts. So reductionism doesn't work. We can't just reduce the hand to a bunch of atoms, even though it is a bunch of atoms. But we can't just reduce it to that because the hand has its own unique functions that atoms do not have. It has emergent qualities. Likewise, societies and governments and groups of people and communities have their own emergent properties. So government is not only responsible for regulating individuals and creating a great life for individuals, government is also responsible for regulating groups of individuals, because within a society you have subgroups. You have religious denominations, you have political parties and factions, you have cults, you have corporations and businesses, you have clubs, you have sports teams, you have all of this stuff that I talked about in my episode about collective ego. And so society needs to not only deal with individual egos, but also collective egos, which adds an additional layer of complexity to this entire thing. Of course, on top of all that, society as a whole is one giant collective ego, which is more than the sum of its parts. So this is very tricky, as you can see. This is very complicated now. And you can see that the way that we discuss politics, none of this is taken into account usually. Usually all that it is it's just one individual or one lobbyist group, special interest group, trying to look out for its own individual interests without caring about the interests of anybody else in society. And this creates a sort of myopia, this sort of stage orange myopia, which creates for a very dysfunctional society. And in a nutshell, we can boil all this down to simply blind selfishness, or what I call devilry. When you're acting out of blind selfishness without any concern for your impact on your environment or others around you, or what it means for society as a whole, you're being a devil. And you can expect the kind of results that a devil gets. You can expect a lot of evil, corruption, and all sorts of other problems, including, of course, suffering, which is why we're talking about this whole topic, is to reduce suffering. That's our whole goal here.